All right. Hey guys, Natalie Cutler-Welsh here from Go To Girl, and I'm sitting here with the lovely Susan Somerville. Now, she's from a business called Humanize, and today we're going to talk about ecotherapy, finding happiness in nature. Mm-hmm. I'm so excited because this is part of my Impact Entrepreneur series where I'm literally shining the light and gleaning the gold from amazing people who are doing amazing work, particularly, but not limited to the area of mental health and happiness in New Zealand. I'm so excited to share with you guys the work that Susan's doing. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Natalie.
Amazing. So let's start off. Can you start off by giving people a little bit of a window into who you are, the work that you're doing, and kind of how that came to be for you?
Okay, so the short version is my background's in psychology. I've done lots of different therapies within that field, and I've worked in training and development and industry. And then I had a very interesting departure into working with an NGO, environmental NGO, looking at environmental impacts, and then doing environmental education. So I've got a kind of two streams of personal development and connection with the environment.
Okay, and I know that now you go into workplaces and you help people.
Yes,
bring the nature in.
You remember that? Yeah.
Like that.
So all of that has brought me to the well-building industry. So looking at how does the built environment support our well-being? So that's physical, emotional, mental well-being. And as we probably all know, there is an epidemic of mental health issues in New Zealand, something like, is it 1 in 6 now? Latest survey from England showed that stress has gone up 37% in the workforce in the last year.
Wow.
I know.
And that, and I mean, we're going to dive into that. Like, what is that about? Where does that come from?
Yeah.
But I know that it's the kind of thing that maybe a lot of people don't even think about. And certainly me, working for myself, working from home in a beautiful place with lots of, I know you guys can't see it, but lots of nature all around me. But I've got a friend, and she used to work in the mall for 6 years in a travel agency. And she's just like, I can't believe it now. I have fresh air.
Yes.
I have natural sunlight. Yes. These are things I just took for granted all the time.
Well, I mean, as a human being, you should take that for granted. It's a basic necessity, and it's a basic human right. And I do believe that we shouldn't work for money and in exchange give our well-being and our happiness. That's not a fair deal.
So do you feel like that is kind of what's going on, or more and more that's what's going on, and that's why there's the rise?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of factors. Certainly stress just from pressure, overwork. I remember back in the 80s when I was in HR and we were talking about the paperless office, and the idea that the biggest stress was going to be, how do we fill our free time, our leisure hours? Because I know. Well, that didn't happen, did it? So stress. There are issues with management, leadership style, lack of clarity. We've got a bullying epidemic also in New Zealand, and where was I going with that? The stress. Right, so there's the psychological stress, and then there's the physical stress, and you alluded to that with working in a mall, which is an entirely unnatural environment.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a lot of work back in the day with rats, so we could experiment on rats in those days. And if we wanted our rats to behave well, we had to give them a nice cage to live in. It's probably...
We all need a nice cage to live in?
I'm not saying people work in offices are in cages, but they're there for the duration, so they have to be in an environment that supports their physical body, their mental needs, and their emotional needs.
Yeah, I met with a woman last week, and she's very involved with housing and poverty, those two topics. And she was talking about the impact on health. When you have poor housing, it's something that, as you know, my husband is very interested in studying respiratory health and housing and things like that. And you're talking about that as well, but also the workplace where we spend so much time.
Yes, the workplace.
Yeah.
Our lighting is unnatural in the workplace. Basically our physiology is still the same as it was when we spent all of our time outside. So we've come to a point now where more people live in cities than don't. So we've had this huge rush to urbanisation. It's never happened in human history before. So we're kind of like an experiment.
Yeah, we're like the rats.
We're a lot like the rats.
Oh my gosh. So changing onto a more positive thing, I wanted to say congratulations are in order, because I hear that you are, what is it, a Fit Well ambassador in New Zealand.
Yes, I'm thrilled to bits. This is the International Well Building Standard, and it's a combination of the Centre for Active Design and the American Centre for Disease Control. So it's coming out of a well-being approach, looking at how do businesses support well-being. And there's a huge financial cost to people being sick as a result of where they work. We've all heard of Legionnaire's disease and sick building syndrome, and these things still haven't been adequately addressed.
I remember Susan and I both spoke together at an event we co-hosted called Empowered Connections, and she did this amazing presentation, which really inspired me to get her on my on this recording today. And we're gonna actually screen share with you guys in a moment, and she's gonna show you some of the slides from her presentation, which is pretty cool. But at the very end, I remember you saying, with occupational safety and health in New Zealand, now we're at that point where we've got the kind of the safety side sorted, and now finally the health is coming into its own.
Yes. Can I tell you another chilling thing?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay. So the Centers for Disease Control in the States, they did a study looking at occupation versus health risk. What they found was that high-value office workers, but that'll be a lot of the people listening to this, are most at risk of what they call neurodegenerative disorders. So that's things like Alzheimer's, dementias, MS, Parkinson's, things like that, which are horrible. So that says something about the type of work. High value means using your brain a lot, under a lot of stress, and the context in which the work is done, which is the office environment.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me just more and more and more grateful for the fact that I'm working for myself. I can work where I want. But there was a time when I was one of those cubicle people, and it was like not even the environmental side of it. I actually worked for an environmental company, Environment Canterbury, down in Christchurch. And I would bike to work, and there I'd be, and the stuff we were talking about was important, like smog in the city and all that. But it was just that life's. It's not my jam, and I just I'm so not meant to be working for someone else. But I can't imagine 20 years of working in an environment where the physical surroundings of the environment are negative for your health.
That's totally true, but not everybody has the luxury of going out and working on their own. So it really is a responsibility for the building manufacturers, the developers, all the people involved in creating those spaces to bring awareness into it, to create spaces that are uplifting and supportive. And there are awesome examples around the world of green buildings, because a big part of health is bringing nature indoors. So biophilic design. Google the Amazon spheres, hard one to say.
Okay.
Where Amazon head office, they have an unlimited budget, but incredible spaces.
Just to get some ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So is that what Humanize does? Was it your sister? You go in.
Yes.
And you help them bring nature inside.
Okay, so yes, my business Humanize is about creating spaces that are fit for people, and we mean fit in the highest level. So bringing out the best in people rather than being a stressor and exhausting and all those negative things that we don't want. So it is possible to bring elements of nature into the office. The obvious thing is plenty of plants. And there are rules, we actually have a breathing bubble around us. And so we really should have a large leaf green plant within sort of 4 feet, within probably arm's length.
Yeah. So, and does that depend also on the number of people in the office space?
Well, yes, it does.
Right.
But if everybody has a nice big leafy green plant, then they've got their breathing buddy.
Yeah. Wow, their breathing buddy. That's cool. All right, I want to go to some visuals because you guys, I love the slides that she shared at our event. So I'm going to screen share now, and if I'll just hand over to you to kind of give them a little idea of what you did in your presentation. Okay. There we go.
Thank you. So this is a little bit more on really the connection with nature. let's see. So we're finding happiness in nature because really that's where we're at our most comfortable. So we all recognise beautiful, idyllic rural scenes like this. This is rural New Zealand. In some ways, that's a bit of a green desert when you look at it. It's just all grass. We probably could have more gardens there. But we've gone from this, much more in connection to the natural world, to this. This isn't quite Auckland yet, but I used to live in Hong Kong, and that's pretty much a view out of my apartment window. So nothing like the natural world. And it's led to an epidemic, really, a very sad situation of so many people with mental health issues. That's anxiety, here we are. Emotional health would be anxiety, addictions, depression, and of course, the very tragic end result could be suicide. And we probably all know that New Zealand, unfortunately, leads the world in youth suicide. That's a huge tragedy. Our physical health is hugely impacted by not being in connection with the natural world. And you see, it's called nature deficit disorder, which I think is, really says it all. Biophilia is, I think I used that word without telling you what it was.
I think you mentioned it before.
Yeah. Like, what's that? So bio means nature or life, and philia means the love of. So it was coined by this wonderful man, E.O. Wilson, a philosopher, scientist, and he really brought out this concept of the importance of our connection with nature, that human beings are part of the natural world, and without that, we're not fully ourselves. Another great writer and thinker in this area is Richard Louv. Do have a look at some of his books. He's a brilliant speaker and much clearer than me. And I love this quote because it's about that precious time of childhood where we first learn to feel safe in nature. And when we have that, it's almost like nature then becomes part of ourselves. And in times of strife later on in life, because that's what happens in life, stuff happens, going back into nature is a way of reconnecting with that lovely childhood safety and security.
Let's just jump in there. I, as you probably know, I used to work at Outward Bound as an instructor. So I lived there literally in Mulgrave Sounds in Anakiwa for 2.5 years, like immersed in the outdoors, which was amazing. Anyway, there was this couple of people had kids, when they were there. This is pre-children for me, but there was this young boy, and I just vividly remember him going, "Look, it's a thick insect." And it was a stick insect, and it was just the cute, and he was so into nature, and he'd always wear gumboots everywhere and all that. And now my kids are at that age where they're like, they don't say thick insect, but there's like, "Mommy, it's a praying mantis. Mommy, there's a and we talk about the praying mantis, it's on the door, and then it'll be like in the house. Oh, there it is in the kitchen." And they have these boxes, and they give it sticks and water, all that stuff. Beautiful. So it's like, oh my gosh, but it reminds me, and I think you're right. Kids have that curiosity around nature and stuff, and then as they get older, it fades, doesn't it? Or do we just lose it? We need to put ourselves back in that zone.
Yes, I think it's always there because we're wired that way. That's this concept of Edward Wilson, is that we are wired like that. Our physiology responds to the green of trees and the sound of birds and, the soft wind. Our physiology calms down. Like, it isn't a conscious thing that happens. I think it's a conscious choice to spend time in nature. And then when we do, then we get those benefits.
Yeah.
So we almost, to begin with, we have to do it before we realise we need it. Yeah, so do have a look at Rich's work. He's just a beautiful human being. Oops, just not doing this thing.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And, of course, here we have the fact that if we're not spending time in nature, what are we doing? Well, kids are spending too much time inside, not moving. I mean, moving is part of who we are. Again, we're designed to be moving about. There's always this endless discussion in offices about sit desks or stand desks. And actually, we should be sitting and standing. Yeah, mine's my ironing board. Don't tell anyone that. So we should be sitting, standing, moving, climbing, pulling, pushing, doing all those things that our bodies were designed to. And I think when we repress those urges to be moving, stress builds. Now that's a whole other. You've talked a lot about stress, I'm sure.
Well, I think that stress is something that everyone has, but it does affect people differently. Do you find?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And that's a really interesting point, because stress can be so much in our bodies, but not registering in our minds as anxiety and worry and sleepless nights. But the hormones of stress are flooding our bodies, but there can be a disconnection between what's going on in the body and what's going on in the mind. And really, I mean, in my view, any disease condition, like the degenerative diseases, are a consequence of stress, because they come out of fight, flight. They don't come out of rest, repair and digest. So we do need more stream time and less screen time. We need to just give our minds and our bodies time to not have to do or be anything. It's just freewheeling. And I heard an article, a woman who's a runner, runs a lot, and she talked about, she's got a high demand job, and she talks about going running and letting her mind just freewheel, just not think about anything, not be trying to meet any needs or demands of her work. And when she comes back from running, the solution's there. So sometimes we need to allow ourselves just that free time.
I actually did a previous interview with Sarah Noble. You guys check it out if you haven't seen it. It's on self-love. But we talked about self-love and self-care and how they're overlapping. And I was saying I'm great at self-love. Like I think I'm pretty awesome, but I'm not great at self-care. Like I'll be dehydrated. I'll skip lunch because I want to get work done. Yeah, no, I wait till 3:00 and then I eat with the kids. Anyway, but yeah. And I have a nice hot breakfast after I've dropped them off at school. But anyway, but I know that more time in nature is good for me. Like I know that, and I actually love it. I came from there, but along the way, I got more into like must get things done, must be productive during my child-free time. As a result, so for me, it's like, okay, actually, I want to make it a priority, and I want my kids to have stream time.
Yes. So you have to model it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. I often think back, my kids grew up in the country, and I still think, maternal guilt is a terrible thing. I still think, did I do enough of this? This is a picture of my kids, so we did do some of that. But I always think, was it enough? But any ways that you can get that moment, a stick insect, thick insect, a praying mantis, all those things. We bring the monarch butterflies in. Yeah. And you watch a monarch butterfly, and if you really get the fact that it does turn from a caterpillar into the chrysalis, into just a cellular soup, like it isn't a caterpillar that sprouts wings, it goes into just liquid and then reorganizes itself into a butterfly. Like that moment can be transformative for a child, to just really get the awe of nature. And actually, I think that's part of being in nature, is that, I'm winging it here, but I think it's about knowing our place. That we as a species suffer a little bit from this old-fashioned word of hubris, of thinking we're above the rules of the natural world. And anytime we think like that, and exceeding the limits of the natural world, exceeding carrying capacities, then there are consequences, not just for the environment, but for us, because we're all connected. So knowing that the natural world has rules that are above us being able to break, and that we have to work within those boundaries. And that, to be honest, I think is quite comforting. So is that gonna? Thank you. So what we want is to prescribe vitamin N, and this is actually a picture of someone from the Orkney Islands, where the doctors there now prescribe time in nature for people suffering from heart problems, from depression, from all sorts of things. They just say, well, I prescribe for you a half an hour out in nature. And those islands aren't nearly as gentle and forgiving as New Zealand is, so if they can do it, we certainly can. And also, interestingly, at Cornell University, they're really leading the field in, making the connection between mental and physical health and well-being and spending time in nature. So it's entirely measurable. And here's a list of some of there are plenty more, but some of the benefits. The main thing is, the sum of all of these benefits is that being in nature makes us happy. And out of a single happy person comes happy relationships, happy families. You take that happiness back into your work environment. And really, it comes from spending time in nature in whatever way, works for you. We've got a little bit of a kind of a conflict at the moment, because there is such focus on global climate change, and it's a scary thing, particularly for children, a very scary thing. And so children can feel like the environment is a scary place, that they don't feel safe there because it's going to get hot, the seas are going to rise. How can the natural world be a haven when it's scary and potentially going to wipe out cities? So I had some conflict about the protesting climate change, and I really would like to see children being encouraged to focus on positive action that they can take, as opposed to protesting.
Feeling empowered,
doing something. Also, so we've got the issue of maybe a scary future from the natural world kind of becoming the enemy, and we've got our children. Your kids haven't got to high school yet? No. Mine have gone through high school, they're at university now, but they both studied media studies in year 12, and it was all about dystopian futures.
Oh yeah.
Horrible. Why? What about utopian futures?
I hope they don't do that anymore.
I know, and they studied horror instead of comedy. So we must be careful what we put in our children's minds particularly, and we must be careful what we put in our own minds. We've got to really be empowered that right now we can create positive futures. So there is a new nature movement coming, and it's about falling in love with the natural world. Obviously, it starts with children, or the parents can all, we need to reconnect all of our lives with nature. And Richard Louv, who's coined this term, New Nature Movement, he said it's got to be above sustainability and more than conservation. It's got to be inspiring. It's got to be about regeneration and positive futures. I read the other day that in Russia, the government has gifted small plots of land to people who want them to grow food. So now these small plots of land of ordinary people gardening now produce something like 90% of Russia's supply of potatoes.
Oh,
I know. Amazing. So they're the biggest organic food producer in the world. There's these small little gardens in Russia called dashas. So
maybe they're forging the way for the future.
Well, it was inspiring. It felt like really very hopeful. So Vera, there are forest schools, and I think you've talked about that with Celia.
Oh yeah, it was Celia.
So
if you guys
lovely.
haven't seen it, watch that video with Celia where we talk about nature play and forest schools.
Yeah, that's very cool. There's a new movement called Biomimicry, which is looking at design inspired by nature. Things like geckos can walk anywhere because they have these like little Velcro hook things on their feet. So they inspire people to design things that achieve the miracles that nature can. Regenerative agriculture is about each time you crop, using these principles, you actually build the soil for the next year. So that's human beings working in concert with nature, within nature's rules, to actually make life better for all of us. I mean, really, we don't have to save the planet, we have to save us.
Yeah, the planet's got it sorted.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Biophilic cities are an amazing thing. Singapore is the best example, and this is actually a photo of Singapore. You know, it's about the same size as Lake Taupo, with something like, hopefully I haven't got it wrong, something like 12 million people. Crazy, insane density, and yet they've made a priority of having a lot of green space. So these trees are man-made, but they're embedded with lots and lots of plants, and they help purify the air. They've even got urban otters back into the waterways in Singapore. So what I want to leave you with, is that we want nature warriors. We want, us, everybody, and particularly to inspire our children to reconnect with nature, feel safe there, to feel at home there, and be warriors for the natural world and not worry about the future, because we can create positive futures.
I love that phrase, the nature warriors, not warriors, because we don't want to be worried all the time.
Oh, exactly.
And like, that's the climate change thing that you mentioned.
It is very worrying.
We're just going to create more stress. It's like, what can we do about it?
Plant a tree or 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, the sun's coming in to greet us to tell us that it's like, this is important stuff.
It is.
And one thing I wanted to mention, that when we were at one of our planning meetings for the Empowered Connections event, and the goal of that event was to raise awareness and also mentoring and money for a trust that I think we'll elaborate on in a minute. And I remember that, I think it was you might have said, we were talking about people in society that do have anxiety, depression, mental health. And I think it was you that said something like, they are the nightingales in the mine. Is that the right? Canaries. They are these people are the canaries in the mine. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes. So it goes back to mining days, and the miners would take a canary in the cage into the mine, and the canary would die from the poison before the people did. So if they noticed their little canary was dead, that was the warning to get out of the mine. So with so many people, vulnerable people with, I think, really caring, deep hearts, lose hope, we know that as a society we're in trouble. So, we have to refocus on, how do you put this succinctly? We have to refocus on building connections within ourselves, to that still place within us that is always peaceful, to the natural world, which reminds us of that, to each other, and to a sense of purpose, that we can make a difference when we come together.
Rather than that hopelessness, like it's all too big, it's all too hard, what's the point, and things like that.
Yes.
One of the things I often ask when I do these conscious conversations is there a particular charity, cause, or organization that you support or that you want to shine the light on a little bit?
Yeah, it definitely is the Youth Suicide. There is a charity called Youth in Transition that helps children who have seriously considered or even attempted suicide, so it really helps them. And it's a transformative program that's really successful. The women there are totally wonderful. They're huge-hearted people,
and there's lots of men mentors as well.
Oh, sorry,
that's right,
and men, and so yes, they always need help with people who would like to mentor the children, and of course they always need funds to help with the program. And it actually costs to put one child through their, I think it's a 12-week program.
I think it's called Journey to Happiness.
Yeah. And it costs $3,000.
Wow.
For one child, and they've got children on their waiting list.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I think that would be a great place to help if you can.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. So there we go, you guys. We're talking today about ecotherapy, and now everyone can be like, oh, they know what ecotherapy means. And I think it is a good reminder. And like I said, I think we all know, like intellectually, like I know, that being in nature is good, but it is a matter of actually taking action on it, making it a priority, weaving it into your daily routine. Like I have this little calendar here, it's like when you think about your week, and of course some people work full-time and that's fine, but it's like my husband actually just started biking to work again. Cool. He used to bike to work, then he got into the habit. He has a company car, driving totally 100% electric. We have solar panels, so he never has to, we just charge it up at home. But he decided he wanted to bike, and he's loving it. Yes. So it's like, where in your life can you, and I'm talking to myself as well, where in our lives can we tweak our schedule and just make time for ourselves, and just getting more nature, getting out into nature. And then, like you said, with the plants, like get a plant beside you, and bring nature into your own life. Yes. So so if you're watching the replay, comment below. We would love to know what you're doing to have more nature time, because as Susan says, nature is medicine. Nature is medicine. Thank you for reminding me I say that. She says it. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Thank you. Sorry, where can people find you if they want to find out more about what you're up to and follow you and Humanize and everything? Right. Yeah, no, I haven't been good on that. I need Natalie's help. I'm on LinkedIn, Susan Somerville with Humanize, making places fit for people. There we go. Thank you. Awesome, guys. See you later. Bye. Bye.